Alrighty.
All right, so I think we can go ahead and start. As anybody else comes in, we'll click them in. So we wanted to first introduce ourselves. Thank you guys for making it. And what we're going to do is we're going to introduce ourselves. We're going to go into our services, and then we're going to hit some of the stuff that you guys should know as far as review. This is a review. I don't know if maybe by show of hands, you guys can let us know how many people actually finished the training via Teachable. Okay, so we have one. Okay, so for the, okay, two. So for the most part, it looks like people haven't gotten to finish the Teachable thing yet, which is fine. The nice part about Teachable is you get to go at your own pace. So let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. I'll start. My name is Carolina Nájera Magaña, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm the counseling program director for Domestic Violence Solutions. And I have been with DVS for 10 years. 10 years, yeah. And I see clients directly for counseling. I also oversee a couple clinicians. Our program is very small. So when you refer to us, or if you refer to us in the future, you know my face. So you know who you can reach out to ask any questions. We're happy to answer any questions. It goes directly to us, and we try to get back to people as soon as we can, which will remind me for the end of the meeting, I got a call from one of your coworkers, Martha, but her voicemail is full when I try to call her back. So hopefully one of you guys can share her email in the chat at some point so that I can get back to her. I don't want her to think I didn't bother calling her back. Go ahead, Vero.
I'm Veronica. I'm the Assistant Director of Programs with DVS. I've been with the agency for about 5 years now. I started off as a client advocate, and then from there went to lead advocate, and then just kind of went up from there. So now I do oversee both sites and the programs in general, and kind of make any changes or improve any of the programs as we see fit. So I would be your guys' main contact if ever there are any issues with any of the programs or questions you may have, or if you guys have any trouble getting a hold of us through the crisis line, as in the last couple of days, for some odd reason, we've been having some trouble with that. I would be the next contact for that. In regards to just contacting staff or contacting the crisis line. Before we move forward, if I can have all the participants or attendees, please either type in their name or email into the chat box just so that we can confirm your attendance. So later we can give you guys your guys' certificate.
Okay, so this presentation again was meant as a review, and I know that a lot of you guys haven't completed the Teachable platform, the 40-hour training yet, so you might not have covered this specific material. The goal for the review is for you guys to get to know DVS, what we do, how you can refer to us, and some topics that we believe are really important to go over with you guys. Feel free to take care of yourself. It's 2 hours. We understand how difficult it is to sit through. In the last one, we gave a 15-minute break, but I think it was too long. So we're going to do a 5-minute break about halfway, and then we're going to come back and finish. We encourage that you guys ask as many questions as you want. We're hoping that you guys feel comfortable enough to ask questions about things that maybe you didn't quite understand from the Teachable modules. And because we do have 2 hours, and depending on the number of questions, we're going to stay flexible on the material. So some of it will kind of, I know that you guys will have gotten it if you did it, then we'll kind of like breeze through. Other information will focus in more depending on what it is that you guys do. I think in the last training, they were saying that you guys don't really do suicide risk assessments, that goes to somebody else. So we'll hit that a little less in this presentation. And then certificates at the end of the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about the certificates you guys will get once you guys finish and how you can represent that on your resume. Say, we want to make sure that we're representing the certificate appropriately and accurately. And you'll get more information on that when you do the module on confidentiality and legal issues. But I kind of wanted to touch on it if you haven't received that module yet, if you haven't done that module.
Okay, so a little bit about us here at DVS. DVS for Santa Barbara County's mission is to provide safety, shelter, and support for individuals and families affected by domestic violence and collaborate with community partners to raise awareness regarding the cause, prevalence, and impact. DVS is Santa Barbara County's only full-service provider of 24-hour emergency shelter and services for survivors of domestic violence. So we're going to be covering a little bit of the programs that we have to offer here at DVS and some eligibility requirements. We won't go too into depth, but please, if you do have any questions in regards to a specific program, either put it in the chat. Battle will let me know if there's a question, or just go ahead and stop me and ask the question as well. I welcome any questions just to clarify anything if needed. So some of our services, one of the main ones and the main way anybody can get connected to our programs would be through our crisis and information line. So trained staff provide counseling, information, and referrals, and access to immediate shelter. So I'm going to circle back to the word counseling. It's more of crisis counseling or crisis intervention of what the staff or advocates provide. In your guys' 40-hour training, if you've already gotten to that part, you did get to learn about crisis intervention, crisis counseling, the differences there, what is advocacy and all of this. So that's a lot of what happens on our crisis line. The advocates will assess the caller's situation and then determine which program they may be eligible for. If it's a program maybe that's outside of DVS, then we'll give them the appropriate referrals or phone numbers or person to contact, and kind of we'll go from there. So we do have the two main crisis lines that cover South County, and then the other covers North County. Really any number, the 964 or the 925 number that gets dialed will reach staff. The only difference is if the caller selects option or extension 2, they will be connected to the Santa Barbara staff. And if they select option or extension 3, they will be connected to the Santa Maria staff. Just to clarify a little bit, South County encompasses Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, Isla Vista, Goleta. North County is Lompoc, all of the Santa Ynez Valley, Guadalupe, Orchid, and Santa Maria, of course, and I think even part of Nukuyama. So it's a big reach that our crisis line can cover, and a lot of people that it can help as well. So one of the other services that's also one of the main and big services that we have is our emergency shelter. So survivors and their children may stay in one of our 2 confidential emergency shelters for up to 60 days. They're not obligated to stay all 60 days. However, that is available to them if they see fit. While at our shelters, they receive emotional support, food, clothing, goal planning or assistance, which is case management, advocacy for medical, legal, and financial resources, along with any other information and referrals that they may need. With that, the families or the individual is not obligated to stay all 60 days, but say if a family is coming up on their exit at the end of their 60 days and they maybe have a move-in day or a move-in day into another program or something along those lines, then they have a possibility of extending past those 60 days, just a week or 2 more. We try and accommodate as best as we can, but just wanted to share that if any potential eligible clients. Also with that, at our emergency shelter or programs, really, we also house or provide services to male clients. I know in the previous session, there was a question if we also assisted or served male clients, and we do. So again, if they come in single or with family, kids, then they are also welcome as long as they're eligible. And the eligibility requirements for shelter is we do a 2-step interview. So both interviews would need to be approved by a supervisor in order for the client to be eligible to come in to shelter. And so those interviews can be completed on the same day and essentially come on the same day. However, clients have 7 days after being approved for shelter to come into shelter as well, if they need more time.
I think it's important to note too that all of these services that we're offering while they're at shelter are voluntary. Nothing is mandatory when it comes to the shelter services that we offer. It's offered to them, but they can decline if they're not interested, and it can be just shelter only.
So our DIVERT program, which is DIVERT stands for Domestic Violence Emergency Response Team. DVS advocates respond with law enforcement to domestic violence calls and provide victims support, advocacy, and access to safety, confidential shelter. Advocates also respond out to medical offices or the ER room. And really the only way for a DIVERT to be, I guess, called out would be if it comes from law enforcement or a medical staff, a medical social worker, a nurse, or some kind of medical office staff as well. We would either go to the site, go with police, the scene of the crime. Sometimes it's at the police department. The location really varies. It's wherever they are located, and we'll go ahead and respond, offer the client services. The main one that we tend to offer as well is confidential shelter. When we offer confidential shelter, that's really the only loophole, I guess you can say, in getting out of the 2-step process for shelter, because we would do the interview there in person, and it would just be the one interview, and if eligible, then we would bring them into shelter right then and there as well. However, we do have a window of time of when we are able to go out and respond with law enforcement or medical offices, which is typically our quote unquote business hours, which would be 8 a.m. to about 7 p.m. After that, we take them as a callback DIVERT. So any calls or any other referrals that come in from either party, then we will just give them a call back within 24 hours to reach out and offer services and see how we can assist them. Sometimes clients will, not be wanting or willing to receive services. Maybe they're not ready or whatever the case may be, or they identify that they're not in need of it. So that is still a possibility, even if we're not able to respond out to them within or outside of the window of time that we're able to respond. Our housing assistance. So this year, the DVS converted its 2nd stage facility, which used to be our transitional shelter out in Santa Barbara. It was converted to a permanent project-based Section 8 housing for 15 domestic violence survivors and their families. So currently that project, or the project-based Section 8, is at capacity. All of the units have been filled with families. So we're not taking any new applications or recommendations for that facility, which is great. And I'm sure that as soon as we have any openings, if there are any openings coming up, we would let our partner agencies know, so that if they have any qualifying clients, that they may apply and see if they're able to be housed. Again, this facility is in Santa Barbara only though. And additionally, our Domestic Violence Housing First program offers temporary financial assistance, case management, career development, and financial literacy training, which prepares families to re-enter the housing market successfully. So the first program can kind of cover various financial situations. So childcare, rent, deposits, relocation fees, sometimes legal fees, children's needs, the basic needs like emergency food, clothing, there's even like a miscellaneous type of needs. So like smaller things that aren't like rent. So right now we are wanting and working towards using up the funds we have available by the end of the year. So by the end of December, we need to spend up these monies so that hopefully in the following grant year, we're able to get this grant approved again. So if you guys have any clients that are currently experiencing domestic violence, survivors of domestic violence that find themselves in a situation that they're a financial situation that due to domestic violence, please have them call our crisis line so that we can complete a mini assessment is what we call it. It's an intake with them so that we can try and get as much assistance for them. Again, it's only up until the end of the year. After this year, we're not sure if we'll be receiving similar amounts. Hopefully we do, so that we can help out more families or individuals that are having financial crisis situations. And our job and life skills program. So our job and life skills coordinator helps with the following. She helps resume building, resume writing and interviewing, growing knowledge about financial safety and wellness, looking for work and new careers, planning financially in order to leave debt behind, and planning for the future. Our coordinator, her name is Betsy. She is bilingual, so she can help our English and Spanish speaking clients. She does a lot of remote work, so it would be a lot of phone calls and Zoom right now. But she's a good resource to utilize if any of your guys' clients, again, that are domestic violence victims or survivors of domestic violence that are looking for this type of assistance. Again, you can refer them to the crisis line. The advocates would then assess their situation, fill out a referral form, and send it off to Betsy so that Betsy can contact the client directly. And then we have our community outreach and education. It's more of a service. DVS provides education outreach activities throughout the county together with our team of volunteers, which we're slowly growing right now, our team. DVS participates in community events, conducts the 40-hour training, which you all are participating in, and provides interactive teen education in schools and community organizations. Currently, again, as you guys all know, because of COVID, they have been, the in-person events have been pretty slim. However, there have been a few, and some have had good turnouts. Others with other programs that are smaller in-person events have not had such a big turnout. So we're hoping that if everything smooths out and goes well, we can have bigger turnouts and reach as much of our community as we can with our information. But if you guys have any schools that you might work with that parent meetings or students can benefit from, definitely put them in contact with me so that we can coordinate something and give them some kind of information on DD or healthy relationships for students.
And then for therapy and counseling, like I mentioned before, it's myself, full-time, another full-time counselor. We're all bilingual, bicultural, and then a trainee who's currently completing her master's degree and needs a practicum site. So I do work with practicum students. We're a very small program, and we receive about 30 referrals a month. In the next 2 months, we are going to be down my full-time counselor. And so if you do refer to us for counseling for any of your clients, know that in the next 2 months, it's very likely that they're only going to be offered the education. So we do counseling, clinical counseling for individuals, groups, children, and family. And that could be either where they're a resident at the shelter, or we went with community counseling. We do everything through Zoom. We don't have an office where we see clients currently. And for the next 6 weeks, what we'll offer is non-clinical, not 6 weeks, 8 weeks. We'll offer non-clinical services. So we offer a class. It's 6 classes about domestic violence, 6 different sessions, and we present those individually. We understand that sometimes people don't want to join a group. They don't feel comfortable in a group. And so we do them individually. The hope is that for the next 8 weeks, we're able to do the classes individually with clients and then reevaluate whether or not they want to join the clinical counseling. And hopefully we'll be able to have our clinician back. The turnaround time tends to be at least a couple of weeks. We try to do a callback within a week, but the turnaround time to actually getting somebody in counseling services tends to be a couple of weeks. If you guys would like or are interested in, I could talk to Ellison about a referral that's specific to FSA that you guys can email the counseling program directly so that the caller doesn't have to call the crisis line. A lot of the times that's what keeps them from engaging in any services, is they don't want to call the crisis line because they think, well, I'm not in a crisis. The crisis line is called the crisis and information line, but people usually don't want to call it because they feel like they're taking up a space or something. So if you guys do have anyone who can benefit from, at this point, the non-clinical counseling classes, 6 classes that we offer, then please let me know. I can do a referral so that they can at least do the classes. Our referral source for those classes right now tends to be child welfare services. These clients often need a letter stating that they participated in these services. And so we're letting all our community partners know that right now it's going to be a little tough. You probably want to manage your client's expectation when you do refer to us for counseling, because it's only going to be myself and a trainee that I supervise. So if you guys know anyone who's going through a master's program who's interested in doing their hours, I do oversee and supervise interns. They're not called interns anymore, associates and trainees in practicum. We do make referrals. So it looks like right now it's kind of difficult all around for community partners and our counseling agencies. I talked to Brenda at Calm in Santa Maria the other day, and it looks like it's just impacted everywhere. Clinicians are just not to be found right now. And so we refer clients who are under 10. So children under 10, we refer to Calm. But we also refer to other agencies depending on the client needs. So sometimes we get clients who've had domestic violence long time ago. Let's say it was, 5 to 10 years ago. We're going to prioritize those that are currently involved in intimate partner violence over those clients. And so it would be important to let anybody that you're referring to for counseling know, maybe if your DV was a little longer than, the last 3 years, then it's probably going to be referred out. We try not to, but we have to do what we can as to see the clients that are the most high risk and high need.
Okay. So now we'll go into topics that were covered in your guys' 40-hour training. Again, just to do a review. So please, if you have any questions, go ahead and stop us so that we can answer those questions or discuss, or if you guys have anything to share or add to the topics, please do so. So direct client services. So there are some guiding principles when providing direct services to clients. Those principles tend to be being client-centered, empowering a client, hope and safety. These guiding principles are the shared values and collective sense of purpose that inform and guide our day-to-day interactions with survivors and one another. So empowerment. The individual is not blamed for his or her problems, but is responsible for generating a solution. Autonomy, the promotion of self-determination or the freedom of survivors to choose their own direction. You'll hear me say a lot of having the client or client guided, or again, client centered, any kind of course of, I don't want to say treatment, but interactions that client advocates have with the client. We always try and have the client kind of guide the conversation in regards to goals. However, there are times, and oftentimes, that clients may tend to derail from the goal or whatnot. So we need to kind of draw them back in and have them get back to the autonomy of their goal, right? So where their determination shines, their strengths shine, and so on. So with that, we'll continue or move on to self-care. So paying attention to nurturing the body, mind, and spirit, taking steps to promote one's wellness on all levels. At times when we have clients at shelter in comparison to clients that are non-residential or outside of shelter, there is a big difference, right? So shelter clients tend to be super overwhelmed with what's going on. So they do take that self-care moment for the first couple of days where they listen to their body, may sleep for a couple of days, you know, kind of recharge and refocus themselves to then have all this determination and strength to pull through with any and all their I guess goals and worries and whatnot, in comparison to those that are non-res or even sometimes shelter clients that don't feel like they have the space to do self-care. Maybe they're not in a situation or environment that can give that to them or promotes that of self-care. Maybe they're working long hours, and next thing after working super long hours is taking care of their kids, or if they live with the elderly parents or family members, then it's taking care of them, or whatever their situation may be. It just doesn't have it. It's not an environment where they can go ahead and practice that for themselves. So we have to kind of remind them and maybe start off small with small self-care things they can do for themselves to then eventually get to the point that they can take a step back, self-identify when they need to listen to their body and do that for themselves. So Indigenous support and healing systems. Advocates assume the role of empowering survivors by helping them recognize their strengths and then healing and the healing resources that exist within their culture. This can really mean various things. So who's in their corner, right? Who's their support system? Who's their support network? I know in the previous session, Beto mentioned about the kind of network that is seen a lot in our Santa Maria shelter, mainly just given the area, given the population, the region. A lot of the clients we do see is a lot of Hispanic Latino community. However, there are times that we also see, you know, other ethnicities or races there. But just given the population, that's the one that kind of stands out the most. But not only is it a cultural thing, sometimes even within shelter, some of the clients start becoming their own supports to one another. They start building or learning different ways to cope. So then that becomes part of their healing system. And is I guess it's just more of the conversations that need to be had with our clients in regards to how do you cope? Have you ever been able to cope? When you have been able to cope, what was it that you did? Is there something that we can change with that? Maybe it's not working, or you know, just having conversations with your clients. And then strength-based approach values the capacity, skills, knowledge, connections, and potential in the survivor. So we want to make sure that we are acknowledging and highlighting those strengths that our clients have. Going back to, you know, the healing systems, acknowledging or highlighting the fact that they were able to cope in a certain situation, and now they're in this new environment, or maybe their environment slightly changed. So what can we do different? You were able to do this then. This is a big strength. This let's do this now. Oftentimes we, you know, remind our callers that we understand and know that them just calling the crisis line was hard enough. It took a lot out of them. It was very difficult. It's embarrassing. It's a lot of different feelings for them. And it's a big strength that they didn't know they had. They may be feeling, you know, pretty embarrassed or weak in that moment, but if anything, it's a strength. Asking for help is very hard for many people, not just people that are survivors or victims. So again, acknowledging those skills, their capacities, and their potential. So another guiding principle, hope. Hope encompasses religion, spirituality, beneficence, and encouraging environments. So with religion, it's a binding of people to a higher power, usually by means of a formal organization that is based on established beliefs and teachings. Spirituality, a personal inclination or desire for a relationship with a transcendent or higher power. And beneficence, promoting good for others, encouraging environments, respecting differences, and not imposing values on a survivor. So in respect to the encouraging environment and not imposing values onto a survivor, I think this is really important to check in with ourselves as service providers, to not do that with our survivors, victims, clients, whatever you may refer to them as. It's relatively easy to share our opinions, to share our judgments, I guess you can say, with another person, with friends, families, right? We tend to do that all the time. But when dealing with a survivor or a client, they may be very and highly impressionable, given their situation. Maybe they don't have that network of supportive people because they've been isolated to the point that they just don't have that available to them anymore. Maybe they had it at one point. So now any information they obtain, any sense of a helpful individual that gives them information and now is imposing values onto a survivor, maybe actually derailing them from where they're needing to get to, or might be misinformed because of that. So as a service provider, you really need to check in with yourself and make sure that you're not imposing values, thoughts, information that maybe is not helpful to them. With DVS, I know that we always tell our advocates, you know, to anytime we are offering information to clients, we need to offer it in a way that essentially can cover many clients that may be available to them, and providing this information in a way that we're not ordering a client to take or enact, but rather for them to empower themselves to make the decision of whether or not they'd want to proceed with that.
Sorry, Vito. I think the importance here is the difference between encouraging and pressuring.
Right.
And sometimes we see that difference shining through a lot. And sometimes it's community providers who have someone in front of them who really needs help, right? You on the side of the provider are recognizing, this includes us, we're recognizing that this person is at high risk. We're recognizing that this person really could use help, and we really want them to get the help. And so what Vero was essentially saying is we can give them the tools, but we have to be very important about not pressuring them. And we do get a lot of providers that pressure the client to call us. And it makes a difference whether the client will engage or not, whether they feel like they are being forced to or whether they want to. It also makes a difference on whether or not they continue the service. Say they're, they feel pressured, they get the service, and then they're really flaky when it, comes to showing up to counseling, to showing up to meetings with case managers. It really is important for us to give them the tools and then step back and say, we trust that you will use them when you need them. Because something that happens also for us is they'll feel that pressure and then they'll feel embarrassed that they didn't use it. You'll ask, did you follow up with this referral? And they say, oh no. And then next time you talk to them, did you follow up with this referral? They'll stop coming to you. They won't come to you anymore because they're embarrassed that they didn't use this referral. So it is really important to keep a client engaged in a way that they feel they have the control over it without the pressure. I think the one place we see this really, really happening is through child welfare services. We get referrals through CWS all the time. And sometimes the client is being told, you either go into shelter or we take your kids. So we've had many situations where clients come in and they are not happy. They are not wanting to engage. They are not there yet. They've been pressured into the situation, but it's almost as if they're not benefiting from it. And so we have to reframe it and our expectations of the client. What other place do we get pressure of? Sometimes I think CWS is pretty much the biggest one where we get a lot of clients who are pressured into it. And so we really see the difference between those clients and their levels of engagement versus those that are seeking out the services for themselves.
We also get it a lot from family members.
Yes.
Family members that are really encouraging, their family member or victim to seek out our services, primarily, shelter, and they're there with them in person. They're telling them, coaching them kind of as what to say, how to say it. Oh, you didn't mention this, or oh, you forgot to say this. And it's not that we don't believe them, it's just very clear and evident that the client themselves are not ready to take that step, or they're feeling pressured. So if they do go through with it, it's because of that. And their time at shelter is going to be very short, because they're going to feel like, okay, I came in, I did it for you, but I'm not getting anything out of this because I'm not ready to, right? So maybe in that moment, they don't realize it, or they don't see it as they're not ready to, but rather they're just having various emotions. A lot of our clients see it as they've broken up their family. They have a responsibility for that. If their aggressor went to jail or is in custody, it's, oh, now I'm responsible for this. The kids are going to hate me, so there's many things that a victim or survivor is thinking of, and pressures aren't very helpful. So if it were to come from a service provider, like Gato was saying, it can turn them away from you, or maybe even turn them away from any kind of other service provider. They might be thinking that they would do the same. So safety, the other guiding principle, safety. So this kind of encompasses not just physical safety, but emotional, financial, psychological safety. So our survivor safety is determined by our survivor. They let us know what it's going to look like, how that's going to work, what steps need to be taken. Advocates just kind of guide that conversation as to getting those possible solutions or those steps. But however, ultimately, the safety of the client can be provided from the client themselves. So some areas of safety that we discuss with survivors, again, is that physical, emotional, financial, and psychological safety. For someone that's coming into shelter, maybe they're physically safe, but they're not yet emotionally, psychologically, or financially safe, right? Maybe their aggressor was the main source of income, so they're not financially safe. They're starting to stress out, or they have been stressing out since coming into shelter because they know what that means. They're not gonna have the income to either purchase foods or needs or basic needs like diapers, wipes, things of that nature. They don't know their resources, their local resources, maybe because that information was kind of withheld from them, or they just didn't know that that was available in their community. Emotional and psychological safety. Sometimes our aggressors aren't just physically abusive, they're emotionally and psychologically abusive. And so some of that comes through cyber abuse, using technology to track or abuse someone, stalking tendencies and things like that. So maybe they feel physically safe because they're physically apart, but the abuse is still continuing even though they're at shelter because of that emotional and psychological portion, where they're still reaching out through a third person, and or directly contacting them through messages, text, phone calls, and all of this. So what do we need to do in order to secure that safety, right? So again, that is determined by the survivor as to what that's going to look like. So that entails a lot of our safety planning, which we'll be covering later on, but just to kind of give a little glimpse. So in regards to the emotional safety planning, we would need to talk about things like the connection, the frequency of connection or communication with their aggressor. How are we going to cut that off? Are we going to cut that off? Is that an option for you? Is that something that you're considering? Is like devices in play? Are we going to limit the use of that? If so, what will you need in order to contact other service providers or to still your goals? So it just goes into many questions. It's just a big discussion that ultimately, again, the survivor will determine. The survivor will make those choices. So the advocate's perspective in regards to the safety, it can turn into burnout, countertransference, and non-maleficence.
Non-maleficence.
Thank you, Beto. So that would be the perspective of an advocate. So again, with the frustrations that service providers may see, that service providers see the danger, they can comprehend it, and so it turns into physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual exhaustion for an advocate. You're maybe doing a lot more than the survivor is, maybe putting in a little too much, not to say too much effort, but just a little, you're not practicing your boundaries at that point, right?
I think what you guys say, Vero, I hear you guys say is like, are you working harder than the client? If you're working harder than the client, you're not going to get very far. Again, we want to respect the fact that the client is where they're at, and sometimes where they're at is not where we want them to be. And so this is a huge portion of having the boundaries, like Vero said, is to understand that what we want may not be where they're at. And so we have to not work harder than the client all of the time. They do have to be responsible. They didn't cause this to happen, but they are responsible for the choices that they make from now on. This is also the big push that we do to challenge our clients to go from being victims to survivors. They have to pick up the pieces. Is it fair that they have to pick up the pieces? No, but they do. They have to pick up the pieces. They are stronger for it in the end, but they do have to do it. And so we're there to help them with the tools, but ultimately we all have our own agency, and we are the ones that have to take the steps. If not, we're not going to get anywhere.
Right. And with that, the countertransference, I just want to touch on that a little bit. You know, sometimes we get certain attitudes or behaviors from our client that may or may not get to us. And then it will then affect our emotional response towards the survivor, right? At one point, we're just going to be to the point that we're just not wanting to interact with them anymore. We're trying to limit their interactions with them. We're either trying to, you know, just avoid them in general, which will interfere with the objective, which is either establishing their safety, establishing services, connecting them to the services, or whatever that may be. But the direct services that we do provide to a client, again, the guiding principles is making sure that it's client-centered, empowering a client, that hope is there to some extent, and so that then can empower them or encourage them to keep going and to secure safety. I want to say that the next slide is our break. So
before we move on from the countertransference, this is very much a psychological therapy term. And I think it's really important because we do get clients, we tend to think of clients as being docile, very grateful, very, you know, very much the victim kind of picture in our mind. Lots of the times they're very angry and they're displacing their anger onto you. And so often there's a lot of attitude that comes with it. They may not understand that they're displacing this and they're transferring this stuff onto you. And then you may have a reaction to that. So one of the things that we constantly tell the advocates is, you know, breathe. It's not about you. You know, they may be directing this at you, but it isn't about you. Don't take it personally, because then you become ineffective to help this client. So I think that's really important to kind of keep in mind, is not just their reaction to you, but how then that makes you proceed with them. So make sure that you don't personalize it and that you're able to maintain that professional objectivity so that you can keep working with this client. We've had many clients who have been extremely rude, downright abusive, that we have had to step back and say, all right, let's approach this person carefully, but still be able to offer what we need to offer. And then have these clients be able to kind of break down those defenses enough to trust us and have a very different relationship in the future. So I think it's really important to kind of focus on that. Now we have our break, ¿verdad, Vero?
Yes.
Okay.
We're gonna go into our 5-minute break from the training. So, you know, go ahead and grab a snack, hydrate, or whatever you need to do in the next 5 minutes. I think if we come back at about 2:50, we should be good.
2:57, 2:58. What we can do is Vero and I can stick around in case you have any specific questions during these 5 minutes. If anybody has any specific questions, we'll be here to answer them in these 5 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to talk about assessments again with the suicide assessment. Based on the previous presentation, it doesn't seem like you guys really do the suicide assessment, so we'll kind of like breeze through that. But we're going to talk about the assessments that we use when dealing with our clients. Go ahead. So at DVS, we use the danger assessment. It's an assessment that was developed by Jacqueline Campbell through the Johns Hopkins University. She's a nurse. They used research to determine those risk factors that were highest in cases where there was murders via intimate partner violence. And so they did a lot of research on this, and they found that there are certain things that kept coming up over and over and over in these homicide reviews. And so the assessment was done to help out and help clients understand their level of risk of homicide for domestic violence. And so there's a difference between you telling a client you're at high risk, you know, you have stalking, he's threatened you, you know, he's laid hands on you when you're pregnant. There's a whole other thing when you have a a risk factor level that's given to you, saying this is the level of lethality, of risk of lethality for you. I think it hits different for us. And so what happens is, in order to do the danger assessment, you do have to have training. And in order to have the outcome of it and be able to tell them their level of risk, you do have to have the training for it. You do a training through the site. And I think it's like $150 that you pay to be able to do this. And then you're able to use the classification for it. The advocates do not use this. I use this in our counseling sessions with clients. When I have a client who's I feel is at particular risk for this, or is minimizing or denying the domestic violence, I want them to see concretely where they lie on this danger assessment. So they ask a bunch of different questions. And aside from this, there's also, they ask you to do a calendar where you write down how much abuse there was, what type of abuse there was on a daily basis, which is kind of difficult with clients because a lot of the times they do not remember. They know it was bad, but they can't pinpoint whether they were physically assaulted, whether they were sexually assaulted, where they were verbally abused or not. And so typically what we tend to do is, within the last 2 weeks, do you remember what happened? So I don't know if you can, I don't know if you can Zoom on this.
Yeah, but I can read them if you want me to.
Can you? Because I am blind and I cannot not read that.
Okay, so the first question says, has the physical violence increased in severity or frequency over the past year? Does he own a gun? Have you left your partner after living together during the past year? If you have never lived with him, just kidding. Is he employed or unemployed? Has he ever used a weapon against you or threatened you with a lethal weapon? Does he threaten to kill you? Does he avoid being arrested for domestic violence? Do you have a child that is not his? Has he ever forced you to have sex when you did not wish to do so? Does he ever try to choke you? Does he use illegal drugs? By drugs, and then it explains the different types of drugs. Is he an alcoholic or problem drinker? Does he control most or all of your daily activities? For instance, does he tell you who you can be friends with, when you can see your family, and so on and so forth? Is he violently and consistently jealous of you? Have you ever been beaten by him while you were pregnant? Has he ever threatened or tried to commit suicide? Does he threaten to harm your children? Do you believe he is capable of killing you? Does he follow or spy on you, leave threatening notes, messages, destroy your property, or call you when you don't want him to? Have you ever threatened or tried to commit suicide? And then you total up how many yeses.
Yeah. So we'll do this with clients, and I think it's especially important with those clients, like I say, that minimize or deny. They don't realize how many factors there are, risk factors that are in their relationship. And so they'll get a level of risk. And according to the level of risk is then what the procedure that we follow, whether it's saying, I recommend that you look into the possibility of a restraining order. I recommend that you sit down with an advocate and create a safety plan. It's really, really important for us to be able to show this to clients. I use it as a tool to help my clients really kind of get a sense of what their risk is. So that's the danger assessment. If you want to use it, you have to go through the training, and then you get a certificate stating that you've done the training for the danger assessment. So we use that. Advocates do not use that. We use that in the counseling program.
However, advocates do use something called the lethality assessment, which is similar questions, but it's not exactly like that, like the ones listed. And the majority of the time when advocates use it, it's when we respond out to the divert calls, so with law enforcement or medical offices, and mainly when it's a law enforcement call. Law enforcement is able to offer a victim an EPO, which is an emergency protective order. It's like a short version of a domestic violence restraining order where they're asking the aggressor to move out, stay away from her and kids if kids are involved, or share it in common. And it's usually 5 to 7 days, but because of COVID, our county, and it seems to be still true, has extended it to be a 30-day EPO. And so when we are there at a divert call, sometimes clients right away deny it. Sometimes it could be because they don't know what it is, they're not well informed, or maybe they think it might agitate things or escalate things. They don't think it's going to help for any reason. So then we do the lethality assessment with them to assess their risk and see if maybe they might reconsider, or having seen their responses on paper might change their mind, or if it would maybe incite them to then seek shelter services if there are any available, and we kind of judge and make the call from there and offer appropriate services.
Okay, go ahead. We're not going to get too much into this because I know you guys don't directly deal with this, but part of what we do also is a suicide risk assessment. You should know that if somebody is in front of you and is displaying or talking in ways that make you suspect that they are suicidal, sometimes people will be joking about it, like, oh, they'll say it in a joking manner, and it's enough to kind of like raise your suspicion that maybe something is up. There's a difference between passive and suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideation. Passive suicidal ideation is sometimes when people say like, oh, if I just didn't wake up tomorrow, I'd be okay with that. Like if I got run over accidentally, then it would be okay. It's not them telling you directly that they are going to go and do this. So it's passive. However, it's something that should create a little red flag for you that maybe this person needs to talk to somebody about this. So the training itself uses this PLADPEL to identify warning signs. So you want to listen for, as they're talking, whether or not they have a plan and how specific is that plan. Some people have very specific ideas. I would take all of my mental health meds. I would take all of my medical meds. I would go out and jump in front of a train. Sometimes this could be a very kind of difficult conversation to have, and people tend to shy away from it. They kind of gloss it over and kind of like want to get past it. We really want to pay attention to what they're saying and referring to where they need to go. We want to look at lethality. Is the way that they are talking about that they're going to do it actually lethal? Can they die? And then the availability. Do they have the means to carry it out? Do they have a mental illness or physical illness? Because that increases a person's risk for it. And then depression. Many of our clients are chronically depressed. They've not been diagnosed. They've been depressed for so long, they don't even remember what it's like not to be depressed. I think we all know people who've been so depressed for so long, they don't even realize they're depressed anymore. This is just like the norm for them. And so we want to look out for whether it is chronic depression, so that there's this hopelessness, helplessness that goes with that, or whether it was a specific incident that is causing this kind of downturn, what we call, what we do a lot of diagnosis, informal diagnosis to us is what we call adjustment disorder. Something happened and they're having trouble transitioning out of that. They're having temporary symptoms that are occurring because of this. So pay attention to whether it's long-term or geared because of a specific incident that happened. We use, I know that you guys don't, so we won't go through this whole thing, but we use the Columbia suicide risk assessment in order to find out and how we could help the client. So there's 6 specific questions that we ask. And this is a free training that you can do. Any of us can do this. You don't have to be a clinician, you don't have to be anything. Any one of us can do this. Law enforcement uses this, and it's 6 questions, and you're supposed to ask it exactly the way that it is here. There's no guesswork to this. So you ask the questions, and depending on the person's answers, and it guides you through it, you'll know whether the person is at low, moderate, or high risk for suicidality. And so then you'll be able to figure out what the next step is. If they're low risk, then maybe you give them a referral, like maybe this is something that you could look into with your local community-based mental health provider. If they're moderate risk, then you start thinking about like, let's make a safety plan for how you're going to get through the next few hours. And then if it's high risk, you'll know that they're in immediate danger, and you maybe need to make a call to the access line to get them support in the moment. So one of the major things that we want to do is not ignore it. We don't want to ignore it. They're saying something to you, that means they think you'll listen. And I think one of the things that I hear a lot is that people are very, very worried about and weary about touching the subject at all. We do not want to ignore when somebody is saying something, even if they're saying jokingly. Check in, speak up, let them know, hey, that sounds really dark. What's going on? What, are you okay? So you want to talk to them about it, and you want to respond quickly. Sometimes this kind of indirect, kind of passive way is their cry for help. If you ignore it or if you look uncomfortable about it, then they'll know to shut her off and not continue to seek help. So it's really important that we do, even if you guys don't deal with it, but if you guys get, every once in a while, somebody who really does sound like they need the support, don't shy away from it. Don't leave the person alone if they're in immediate danger. We've had situations where I've had to call law enforcement to come and help with a client who is in immediate danger. You don't want to walk away from a person who's obviously suicidal, has a plan, has the means in the moment. Never keep the plan for suicide a secret. They may say, oh, you know what, tomorrow, before bed, I'm going to take my medicines and I'm going to be done, but don't tell anyone. We don't keep secrets like that. You definitely want to alert someone right away. And then ultimately, it isn't your decision. If the person decides to complete suicide, then it's their decision. You have no control over it. Unfortunately, we've had situations at shelter where people try to suicide, and it's hard because you think, we were here, we were offering the support, where did we go wrong? Ultimately, the person is in charge. They're responsible for their behavior. So if something like that does end up happening, seek out your own help. It's a very difficult thing to go through.
And safety planning, this is the last part of the assessments. So safety planning, a plan is a personalized plan of action whether it's to flee domestic violence, remain in the home or a relationship in a physically safe manner, and or planning the end of the relationship. So some examples of some plans may include packing a bag with some essentials, documents, comfort items, cash and or benefit cards, creating a code word, utilizing it with a friend, family member, safety routes and legal protections. Again, the safety plans are very much guided by the client. It's very much client-centered. Going back to the safety guiding principle, the client will determine what their safety is going to look like, what it's going to be, what is required and needed in order to ensure their safety. It all comes from the client. The clients know their aggressor the best. They can let us as their service provider know what work, not work, what a possible outcome may or may not be if they take a certain course of action or not. So really every safety plan is personalized to each person or family, depending if the client has a family to include on the safety plan. Sometimes safety plans are very complex, where it's okay, this is the adult clients safety plan. This is the safety plan in regards to the kids. This is with the safety plan with the kids and the client. Some are very, very basic where it's just a code word that's needed. They feel, or the client feels like a code word is more than sufficient to cover their safety. Maybe that code word or those code words could mean the things for their circle or their network of people, whether if they text or call and say a
Specific word, a
specific word, then that will mean this or will mean that, and maybe that's sufficient for them. Sometimes the plan involves safety routes. Safety routes could be how to go to and from work, how to go to and from school if they're attending school, or if they have children to drop off at school, or daycare, or sports clubs, or any other kind of extracurricular activity that they may be doing, how to go about that safely, how to travel there and back safely, especially when they're at shelter. Our shelters, we try and keep them as confidential as possible. We want to make sure that their travel to and from, if they're remaining in the same city, is a safe one. And if it's not, then that they think of that and identify that so that they can then do plan B. And what is that plan B? So that would be laid out also in their safety plan. So like I mentioned, the safety plan could be very complex, or it can be super straightforward and very easy. Maybe it's a list of numbers or phone numbers of who they're gonna call in case of this. Maybe it's a list of resources of who they're gonna call in case of a incident. Sometimes we even have safety plans for mental health crisis, where it's their emotional or psychological safety that's in jeopardy again, right? So then it's like, okay, if you're feeling this way, or if you're feeling anxious, or if you're feeling like you're having these types of thoughts, let's call this service, like the access line like Garo mentioned, or calling these other hotlines so that they can see if they're able to help. If not, then this. So again, the safety plans can really range from what they're going to be person to person, family to family. And they could be complex or super straightforward and easy.
Does anybody have any questions so far? You're good? Okay. We're going to be going into crisis counseling. Okay, go ahead. So I don't know whether or not you guys are dealing with people who are actively in crisis. Do you guys deal with people who are actively in crisis through your positions?
Sometimes we do. Yeah, we have more in terms of this specific domestic violence.
Or just in general, crises in general?
Oh, yeah, we do. We do sometimes, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, Maria is saying that depending on the participant, so you do get people in front of you then that, you know, possibly are in crisis. Okay, not necessarily domestic violence, but, you know, generally in crisis. So we know that when someone is in crisis, they're overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed. Their capacity to deal with the situation has been overwhelmed. And it's one of those things where we typically can recognize it when we see it. We don't all look the same when we're in crisis, but we could pretty much recognize for the most part when somebody's being overwhelmed. And so we know it's a state of instability or danger. And then it can cause emotionally a lot of things to happen for a person. Can we switch the? Thank you. So what are the characteristics of someone who is in crisis? Again, there's physically stuff happening. Our brain is cascading so many hormones, so many chemicals throughout our body. And you guys will see this when you do if you've done the portion on the effects of domestic violence on the victim. One of the things that we do in counseling is we try to help the client understand what's happening in their brain to cause the feelings and the emotions and the behavior that is happening. A lot of the times we tend to see a victim as feelings only, but we don't help them understand why they're feeling this way. What's happening up here that is causing them to kind of feel overwhelmed. So you sometimes see clients who are constantly in crisis and you're like, whoa, how does somebody live like this? They're constantly going from crisis to crisis to crisis. Well, you may be dealing with someone with an anxiety disorder. That's how their brain is reacting and they feel bad. They don't feel good about it. So one of the things that we try to do is educate our clients that physically within the brain, something is happening. So if you are able to recognize that, you're able to recognize that the emotional part of it, the shock, the grief, the disbelief, the confusion, the aggression is understandable based on what you've gone through and what your brain is trying to do. So we see a lot of, I think we can, when somebody calls a crisis line, it can be a very anxiety producing situation, which is why a lot of people don't do it. They don't call because it already brings up a lot of anxiety to even think about doing it. And so when they do it, sometimes they're, seeking shelter. And advocates have done this over and over and over again. They know what to ask, they know how to explore, but this is the caller's first time. So they don't know, and they're feeling very anxious about it. And so what we want to do is we want to prepare them and take it slow and be as patient as possible with the client, understanding that this isn't a typical situation for people. And so I really, and of course, I'm going to self-promote my program, but I really recommend that you guys, if you have somebody who feels out of control, who feels like maybe they're crazy, and sometimes they'll say, I don't know what is wrong with me. I don't understand. Education on domestic violence covers a lot of effects on what the brain is doing. We do a lot of that type of education because as a therapist, I want my clients to know that this isn't just craziness. It's something has happened. Your brain has literally changed as a result of the abuse. And you need to know that it's okay and how to come out of it. So when you're doing crisis intervention, it's really important to listen to what they're saying. But as Vero was saying before, we're guiding them because sometimes people can go on forever in many different directions and it's easy to kind of get lost in it. As an advocate, as a provider, we want to help kind of balance that and help the client get to some type of resolution. Maria saying we do work with DV survivors. Oh shoot, I lost that. Let's see. Yes, we will send you information regarding the classes that you can kind of refer clients to so that they can get this information. They don't have to take all the classes either. If they want to do specific ones, they could do specific ones. They're not required to do all 6 classes. In a crisis, you want to help address safety. We talked about that, but also options. I think one of the things that tends to happen is when we're in crisis, and we've all been in crisis, I'm sure we've all been in crisis, we have tunnel vision. We don't see our options. And this is where, as a provider, we're helping them expand that tunnel so that they can see the other options that they have. And obviously, we do that in a very trauma-informed approach where we know, we recognize you're going through stuff. Your brain has changed as a result of this, and you can do something to help yourself. Vero, can you switch that? So one of the things that I think is important as providers to do is if we're feeling caught up in their feelings, and sometimes this happens, you get somebody who's so much in crisis and you're kind of their aura, their feelings are just overwhelming you. It's really important to take a step back and to clear yourself emotionally so that you're prepared to deal with this person. And so with advocates, they're sometimes getting the gnarliest calls from victims who are going through really, really horrific situations in their abusive relationship. one of the things that is very helpful is that if you're going to answer the phone and talk to somebody, that you're actually focused on that, which I know for many agencies it's hard because we're constantly multitasking. I look at my phone because I need to know what's happening with, clients, and am I receiving any information from my kids at school? Like, there's a lot of different things that can take our focus away from the person. We want to try as hard as possible, as much as we can, to focus by clearing that space for that client. If you can't remain calm and centered, and this is sometimes hard when you're doing it in person, sometimes something is triggering you. We've all had trauma. We've all had experienced things in our lives that are difficult. And sometimes without realizing, we get triggered by our client. And in that case, you want to be able to say, whoa, this is affecting me. I'm going to pass the baton to somebody else because I don't think I'm capable of helping this client. Many of us do not do this because we're stubborn and we believe that we should be able to do this. This is not the case. You're not helping this client by trying to stick to this person in this moment when you're struggling. So pass the baton. If you have some other coworker that can step in because you're struggling, then you should get them the other person, because that client needs the person who's able to be present for them. I think towards the bottom here, it says, do not convey disappointment or rejection if a survivor elects to return to abusive partner. I think we talked about this before, is sometimes we want so much for the client. We are frustrated with the fact that they waited this long, or we want them to take certain actions. It's really important to not convey that to them. You need to really work on your poker face so that your face isn't betraying that, because then they will not come back and seek services from you again. Sometimes clients make decisions that we believe are in contrast to their safety, but it is their decision. And so we want to be able to say, hey, I completely respect the decision that you're making. I have concerns, and these are my concerns, but ultimately, if you ever need us again, please pick up the phone and call us. You know that we will be supportive of you. Go ahead and go to the next one. Okay. So we got here a lot sooner. Beto, you're on mute.
Sorry. I was saying go ahead, Caro. I thought it was unmuted.
So we got through this, I think, a lot quicker than we did the first one. I think we had a few more questions in the first one, and we had a longer break. So a word about certificates. First is, for those of you that haven't finished, or those that have finished, you need to send the certificates that you get at the end of every module. You can download them as PDFs, I believe. You need to email those all together to Vero. Vero will then compile your certificates and create a file for you. And she will go back and make sure that you have attended or have, seen the video of this. And then she will issue the certificate. So with the certificate, it's required in order to volunteer for a DV organization, a non-governmental DV organization, agency, or to work. For us, all of us are required to have the 40-hour training when we do direct services. People who don't do direct services are not required to have the 40-hour training. And I know the module on confidentiality and legal issues is so dry. I completely understand it, but it is so important. Please pay special attention to that, because it'll tell you your legal boundaries on what you can do. Because when you have the certificate, you're considered a domestic violence counselor when you're volunteering with an organization that's domestic violence, or when you're employed. And we tend to think of counselor as a therapist, but this is peer counseling. So that module will explain a little more about, the differences between that and what legally is your responsibility as far as keeping confidentiality, about being subpoenaed in situations where maybe you're being subpoenaed because something happened to your client. And in your resume, because it all, this is all great when it comes to adding another line in our resume about what we've done, you can add it as 40-hour domestic violence training certificate of completion. It is not a certificate as in a certificated program. It's not a program. It's you're receiving this saying that you completed the 40-hour training and you've satisfied the requirement, including the face-to-face requirement that we're doing now. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. You can email me directly. You can email Vero. Just make sure that you don't misrepresent the certificate on your resume. It's really, really important that you don't do that because you can get in trouble for that. Other than that, Vero, do we have anything else?
No, we just have space open for any questions in regards to our programs, services. If you guys, I don't know, it's open to any questions you guys might have in regards to the training, maybe